Say hi to the sharks, Eleanor. Those were the last words I heard before the world turned blue and silent, before the woman my son married pushed me off the yacht we'd bought together. I am Eleanor Hayes, 67, founder of a small charity my late husband built from nothing. After he passed, I trusted my son Daniel to help manage our family estate, 3 companies, 2 properties, and the investments that were meant to secure our family's future. I thought we shared purpose. I was wrong. If you're watching this, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to share isn't just a story, it's a warning. Greed doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it grows inside your own home. That morning, Daniel called me himself, his voice softer than it had been in months. "Mom, let's celebrate your recovery," he said. "You've been through enough." I'd been healing from hip surgery alone. He'd been distant since his wife, Vanessa, convinced him to modernize our family trust, words that sounded harmless until I discovered that most of my assets had quietly moved under their names. I confronted them once gently. They said it was just restructuring. I wanted to believe them. So when Daniel invited me on his new yacht, I told myself it was peace at last, a family reunion. I put on the navy blue dress my husband once said made me look calm even when I was falling apart. The first hour was almost perfect. The coastline faded behind us. Vanessa poured champagne. Daniel talked about his new company. Then his questions began, light at first, then sharper. "Mom, have you thought about simplifying the will? It's just complicated for us to manage when you're gone." Gone. Such a small word for such a large intention. That was the moment I saw the truth. The yacht wasn't for celebration. It was a stage. Vanessa filmed me from her phone, pretending to take selfies, catching my face as I sipped my drink. They were building a case. A frail woman, confused, maybe drunk, not fit to manage her own affairs, a woman who might slip accidentally into the ocean. When I told Daniel I wanted to go back to shore, his voice changed, flat, unfamiliar. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Mom." And then Vanessa stepped closer. Her whisper was soft, almost kind. "Say hi to the sharks." The shove wasn't hard, just cruelly timed. As I hit the freezing water, I realized this wasn't just betrayal for money. It was a decision made long before that morning, when greed replaced gratitude and ambition killed love. I sank, but I didn't curse them. I didn't scream. I made a single promise in the silence of the sea. I will not fight them with rage. I will rise again with truth, not vengeance. The ocean is quieter than people imagine. When you're beneath it, even pain has no sound. I remember the light fading, the surface turning silver, then black. For a moment, I wondered if that was how peace felt, cold, weightless, endless. But something inside me refused to let that be my ending. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was my husband's voice echoing somewhere in memory. "Breathe through the pain, Eleanor. Don't let go." So I kicked upward. And when I broke through the surface, gasping for air, I wasn't the same woman who'd boarded that yacht. The waves had washed away everything but clarity. I screamed, not from fear, but to call for life. And life answered in the form of a fishing boat, an old vessel painted blue and white, moving slowly through the mist. 2 figures leaned over the railing. A man shouted, "Hold on, ma'am, we've got you." Strong arms pulled me aboard, drenched and shaking. The man introduced himself as Jake Morrison, 64, a fisherman who'd spent half his life on these waters. Beside him was his grandson, Tommy, no older than 16. "Holy hell," Jake muttered, wrapping me in a blanket that smelled of salt and smoke. "What kind of people leave someone out here alone?" I tried to answer, but my voice cracked. "My family." He gave me a look that said more than words ever could. They took me to shore, not to a hospital at my request, but to a small coastal inn owned by a woman named Mrs. Chen, a retired nurse. She had the kind of face that didn't flinch at broken stories. While she brewed tea, I sat by the fire, still trembling from the cold, the sound of the waves faint through the window. "Do you want me to call the police?" Jake asked gently. I shook my head. "No, not yet. If I told the world I'd survived, Daniel and Vanessa would finish what they started, and worse, they'd bury the truth before I could prove it. I looked into the fire and spoke quietly. They'll say I was confused, that I imagined things. They've already built that story. Jake frowned. What story? That I'm losing my mind. They filmed me, recorded my words, changed documents while I was in surgery. They're setting up to take everything, money, property, even my reputation. He whistled low, shaking his head. Greedy devils. I smiled faintly. Greed is too small a word. This is something colder. Mrs. Chen placed a cup of tea in my hands. Then you need to rest, she said firmly. Tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next. Tonight you live that word, Lev, landed softly, like a promise I hadn't yet made to myself. I spent the night staring at the ceiling of that small room, listening to the hum of the sea. News spreads fast in small towns. By morning, the television in Mrs. Chen's kitchen showed my face. Prominent philanthropist Eleanor Hayes lost at sea. Authorities believe she may have fallen overboard after showing signs of confusion following recent surgery. There it was, the narrative they'd written. The lie wrapped in sympathy. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "They buried me beautifully." Jake looked up from the table. "What are you going to do?" I folded the newspaper neatly. "Let them think they succeeded." He studied me, his brow furrowed. "You mean stay dead?" "Yes." "Ma'am, that's dangerous. So is trusting the wrong people." He leaned back, then nodded slowly. "You've got a plan." "Not yet," I said, "but I have time. Dead women aren't expected anywhere." That afternoon, I borrowed an old coat from Mrs. Chen and stepped outside for the first time since the ocean. The air smelled of salt and pine. Fishermen called to each other from the docks. Gulls circled overhead. No one recognized me. For the first time in months, maybe years, I was invisible and free. Freedom, I realized, doesn't always come with triumph. Sometimes it comes quietly, wearing someone else's clothes, carrying nothing but purpose. As the sun set over the harbor, Jake joined me by the railing. "You're not going after them with guns or lawyers, are you?" he asked. I smiled. "No, Jake. I'm going after them with truth." He nodded, eyes softening. "That's rarer than revenge." "Exactly," I said. "Revenge dies with anger, but truth, it lasts longer than money." That night, as I watched my own obituary scroll across the news again, I made a vow. I wouldn't fight for what I'd lost. I'd stand for what couldn't be stolen, my name, my dignity, and the simple grace of being alive when they thought I was gone. Night had a way of softening everything, except memory. 3 days after the world declared me dead, I found myself standing across the street from the house I'd once called home. The windows were dark, the curtains drawn, but I could still see the faint outline of the magnolia tree Daniel planted when he was 7. He said he wanted it to grow as tall as his father. Now both were gone. Jake parked a few blocks away, engine off. "Are you sure about this?" "Yes," I said quietly. I'm not breaking in. I'm going home." The night air was cold against my face as I slipped down the back alley, wearing the same gray coat Mrs. Chen had lent me. I still had a key. Daniel had never asked for it back. It turned smoothly in the lock, as if the house itself remembered me, even if my family no longer did. Inside it smelled the same. Cedar, faint perfume, and time. But something was off, too clean, too staged, as if it had been rearranged for guests, not lived in. I moved slowly through the kitchen, careful not to touch anything. The refrigerator hummed. Inside, fresh produce, imported cheese, fine wine. Someone had been here recently, not visitors, residents. The living room was covered in white dust sheets, but beneath them I could see expensive new furniture, modern, lifeless. Everything I'd chosen had been replaced, all traces of me scrubbed out like pencil marks on a page. And yet, in the silence, the house felt heavy with secrets. I climbed the staircase, every step a whisper of the years that had built this place. In my husband's old study, the scent of leather and dust lingered. That's where I found it. A folder on the desk labeled in bold print, Eleanor Transition Plan. At first I thought it was some business file, but as I turned the pages, my breath caught. Inside were notes, medical summaries, and typed statements describing my supposed mental decline. Dates, incidents, recordings, every misunderstanding from the past year twisted into evidence. There was a line that made my skin turn cold. Subject shows increased confusion, possible dementia. Recommend advancing to Phase 3 within 14 days. Phase 3. The day on the yacht, they had planned it all down to the timing of my death. I kept reading. Their signatures appeared on bank authorizations, insurance adjustments, and a new will, one I had never signed. All my assets reassigned for protection. Protection, I thought bitterly, from me. I photographed every page with the disposable camera Jake had given me. Each click of the shutter sounded like a heartbeat, steady, calm, inevitable. And then I saw something that stopped me cold. A birth certificate. Baby Harrison, it said, born 3 weeks ago. Parents, Daniel and Vanessa Hayes. But Vanessa hadn't been pregnant. Not 3 weeks ago, not ever. I remembered her on the yacht, slim, glowing, flawless. Not a woman who'd just given birth. A lie. Another layer of their performance. But why? Before I could think further, I heard the sound of a car outside. Headlights swept across the curtains. Voices, laughter, keys turning in the front door. Panic fluttered briefly in my chest, but I silenced it. I'd lived my entire life with composure. I wasn't going to lose it now. I turned off my flashlight and crouched behind the study door as Daniel and Vanessa entered. Think anyone suspects? Vanessa's voice floated through the hallway. No, Daniel said. They think she fell overboard. Coast Guard's closing the file tomorrow. And the estate? Probate starts Monday. Once the trustees see the medical reports, it's all ours. I pressed a hand against my mouth, forcing myself to breathe evenly. They sounded calm, almost cheerful. Then a faint sound reached me, a baby crying. My heart stopped. A baby. In my house. In the nursery I had once decorated for Daniel decades ago. Vanessa's tone softened. I'll get him. Footsteps. The crying eased. I slipped out the back door as quietly as I had come, my shoes barely touching the tiles. The night air hit me like truth itself, cold, unrelenting. Jake was waiting at the corner, engine running. He took one look at me and said, "You found something." I nodded. Everything. And the baby? There's a baby. Registered as theirs, but it's not. He frowned. You sure? As sure as I am that the woman they killed for money didn't die by accident. We drove in silence for a while, the headlights slicing through the fog. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. You're not just dealing with greed anymore, Eleanor. This is a machine, I know. So what now? I stared out at the dark horizon. The same thing the ocean taught me, I said quietly. You don't fight the tide. You wait until it turns. Back at Mrs. Chen's, I laid out the documents on the table. She read them silently, her expression tightening. They planned every detail, I said, even my funeral. And the baby? She asked softly. Maybe proof, I replied. Maybe motive, maybe both. Then, for the first time since the yacht, I allowed myself to exhale. The grief was still there, but so was something steadier, resolve. I wasn't the drowning woman anymore. I was the witness, and I would tell the truth, calmly, completely, and without hate. Because the world doesn't need more vengeance. It needs people who can face evil and still choose dignity. Morning light spilled through the lace curtains of Mrs. Chen's kitchen, painting the wooden table in soft gold. The papers from my house still lay scattered, an evidence of deceit, greed, and something far darker. I hadn't slept. Neither had Mrs. Chen. She moved quietly around the kitchen, refilling my cup as if tea could steady what truth had shaken. You're certain about the baby? She asked gently. I nodded. The birth certificate says he's Daniel and Vanessa's. But she was on that yacht with me just days ago. No recovery scars, no trace of childbirth. It's impossible, Mrs. Chen frowned. Then where did the baby come from? That, I said, folding the document carefully, is what I need to find out. Jake arrived a little after 7, smelling faintly of salt and engine oil. He placed a paper bag on the table, coffee and 2 butter rolls. Breakfast for detectives, he said, trying to lighten the air, but the weight of the previous night still hung between us. I told him everything. Showed the folder labeled Eleanor Transition Plan, the forged medical reports, and the infant's existence. Jake listened without interrupting, his weathered face a mix of anger and disbelief. They forged your death and bought a baby, he said finally. That's not just fraud, that's madness. It's a business, I replied quietly, and someone's making money from it. It was Mrs. Chen who mentioned a name that changed everything. There's a private investigator I know, she said. Used to be a police officer, smart, discreet, and owes me a favor. I hesitated. If I start involving more people, the risk grows. She smiled softly. Sometimes dignity isn't about silence. It's about choosing the right allies. That afternoon, I met Daniel Crawford in a small office above a sandwich shop near the harbor. Mid-50s, gray hair, sharp eyes, and the kind of presence that didn't need to fill silence. It owned it. He listened carefully as I explained what had happened, taking notes in neat handwriting. So, he said, leaning back, you want me to find out where this baby came from and who helped your son forge all this? Yes, quietly, and payment. I have cash. Enough to last 2 weeks. My husband believed in emergency funds for emergencies. I'd say this qualifies. He smiled faintly. Fair enough. I'll start with the medical records and the law firm handling your estate. 3 days later, he returned with answers, in a folder that made my hands tremble before I even opened it. The documents were clear. My son and his wife had been visiting an exclusive reproductive clinic outside Boston, Whitmore Reproductive Services, a place for wealthy clients who preferred privacy over ethics. The arrangement had been made nearly a year ago, long before my supposed accident. They paid cash, Crawford said, large amounts, and there's another name tied to both the clinic and your estate lawyers, a woman named Miranda Torres. I froze. Torres, I've met her. A lawyer my son introduced at a charity event months ago. She called herself an estate transition specialist. Crawford's expression darkened. That's one way to describe her. She's been connected to multiple cases involving elderly clients who died unexpectedly after their families gained control of their assets. It's a quiet network. Legal paperwork on the surface, but the outcomes are always the same. I turned the pages slowly, reading names of people I didn't know. All older, all wealthy, all deceased. And the baby? Hoy, I asked. Crawford hesitated. Born 3 weeks ago, the mother was a 17-year-old girl named Sarah Collins from Maine. She'd been promised $50,000 to be a surrogate for a kind couple who couldn't have children. He paused. She died during childbirth. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then I said quietly, died, or was silenced. He looked me in the eye. That's the part we can't prove. Yet Mrs. Chen's voice broke the silence. So they used the girl's baby to make their story look complete. Grieving son, newborn heir, and a mother conveniently gone. I nodded. And a lawyer who specializes in killing truth politely. There was no rage inside me, only a deep, still ache. I thought of Sarah Collins, a girl who had carried life for strangers who saw her as nothing more than a transaction. She deserved better than pity. She deserved remembrance. That night, I sat by the window of my small room, watching the harbor lights ripple across the water. Jake knocked softly before coming in. You're not sleeping, he said. Not yet, I answered. I keep thinking about the girl. She died so they could live without conscience. It's unbearable. He pulled up a chair beside me. Then bear it differently. Don't fight them with hate. Fight them with exposure. That's what truth is for. I nodded slowly. Tomorrow I'll meet with Miranda Torres. But not as a victim, Jake frowned. That's dangerous. I'm not going to confront her. I'm going to listen. People like her can't help revealing themselves, if you give them silence long enough. He smiled. You've got steel, Mrs. Hayes. No, I said softly. I have peace, Daim, and that's far more dangerous. As the wind rustled through the curtains, I folded the file closed. Tomorrow would not be about vengeance. It would be about restoring what had been taken. Truth, honor, and the name of a girl who'd been erased before she could live. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The ocean outside Mrs. Chen's window was a dull silver, still and endless. as if holding its breath. It looked peaceful, the same way my life had looked before I fell off that yacht. Calm above, chaos beneath. Jake drove me to Boston, his truck humming softly over the coastal road. We didn't speak much. Silence had become our shared language. In my lap was the folder Daniel Crawford had prepared. Photographs, documents, names, evidence that looked professional, but the real weapon wasn't inside the folder. It was me. Whitmore Tower rose like a mirror into the sky. Glass, chrome, and ambition. Miranda Torres's office was on the 18th floor. I'd met her here once, months ago, when she'd flattered me with phrases like legacy planning and protecting the next generation. This time, there were no niceties. Her assistant led me in, eyes widening slightly, the face of a woman who'd seen a ghost. Miranda looked up from her desk, her smile smooth but faltering. "Mrs. Hayes, I wasn't expecting anyone who's supposed to be dead," I finished gently. She blinked, then regained composure. "That's quite the surprise." "I heard about the tragedy. My condolences." "Condolences are for the dead, Miss Torres," I said softly, taking the seat across from her. "And as you can see, I'm not among them." She studied me, her eyes calculating. "Then perhaps we should talk about what you want." "Not revenge," I said, folding my hands neatly on her desk. "Just truth. And names. Starting with Sarah Collins." For a flicker of a second, her expression cracked. Then she smiled again, all professionalism. "I'm not sure who that is." "I think you do," I said, my voice even. "A 17-year-old surrogate from Maine who died during childbirth at a clinic you funded. The same clinic where my son and his wife purchased their miracle." Her tone cooled. "Careful, Mrs. Hayes. Those are serious accusations." "And yet, not once did I use the word accusation," I replied. "I said truth." There's a different silence. Outside, the city hummed, unaware that evil could sound so polite. Miranda leaned back, crossing one elegant leg over the other. "You're a remarkable woman, Eleanor. Most people would disappear quietly, but you're not most people." "No," I said, "I'm not, because I still believe in something you don't. Conscience." Her smile turned thin. "Conscience doesn't pay for yachts, Mrs. Hayes. It doesn't protect families from bankruptcy or scandal. I offer people peace, the kind that comes from ending things before they become messy." I met her gaze steadily. "You mean ending people before they become inconvenient." Her eyes glittered, amused. "Call it what you like." "I call it compassionate closure." The words chilled me more than the Atlantic ever had, but I didn't raise my voice. I simply reached into my bag and placed a small black device on the desk, a voice recorder. "I thought you'd say something like that," I said, "and since Massachusetts is a one-party consent state, this conversation is perfectly legal." For the first time, her composure slipped. "You're bluffing." I smiled. "I'm breathing." "That's proof enough I'm not." She stood, walking toward the window. "What do you want, Eleanor?" "I already told you. Truth. But don't worry, I won't take it from you. I'll let you give it to me, one sentence at a time." For an hour, I let her talk. Not by force, but by silence. People like Miranda hate silence. It pulls truth out of them the way the tide draws shells from sand. She spoke of families who came to her, desperate to claim what they thought was theirs, of doctors who adjusted reports, lawyers who closed eyes, and bankers who transferred assets with compassionate discretion. When she finally stopped, I said quietly, "You could have built empires with your intelligence. Instead, you built graves." Her eyes flashed. "And yet you're the one sitting in front of me, alive because I underestimated you. Not alive because of you," I said. "Alive despite you." I stood, smoothing my coat. "Thank you for the conversation. I believe it's been clarifying." She tilted her head. "You're not going to the police?" "Not yet. Why?" "Because I'm giving you the chance to do what no one in your world remembers how to do. Tell the truth first. And if I don't," I looked at her gently, "then the world will hear it from me." When I stepped out of her office, Daniel Crawford was waiting by the elevator, phone in hand. "Got everything?" he asked. "Every word," I said. She confessed enough to expose the pattern, even if she didn't name every client. He nodded. "Then what's next?" I looked out through the glass wall at the city, shining, blind, alive. "They think I want revenge, but I want something rarer, clarity. Back at Mrs. Chen's that evening, the sea breeze carried the scent of salt and justice. Jake was fixing the old radio by the window when I walked in. "Well?" he asked. "She talked," I said, "and now I have what I need." He smiled. "You're going to take her down?" "No, Jake," I said softly. "I'm going to let her take herself down." The truth always does the heavy lifting. He laughed quietly, then poured me tea. "You scare me sometimes, Mrs. Hayes." "I don't mean to," I said, looking out at the horizon, "but maybe the world could use a little more fear of decency." That night, as the waves whispered against the shore, I opened my journal and wrote a single sentence. "Tomorrow I rise." Not as a ghost, not as a victim, but as a woman who had drowned in betrayal and surfaced in dignity. The morning I returned home, the air felt unusually still. The garden was quiet, the magnolia tree swaying slightly as if remembering another season, the years when laughter still lived here. I sat in my old armchair, the one by the window, and waited. When Daniel and Vanessa walked in, their faces went pale. They froze in the doorway, staring at the mother they thought the sea had claimed. "Hello, my dears," I said softly. "You look well." No anger, no shouting, just silence. The kind that forces truth to surface. They stammered excuses, accidents, misunderstandings, but lies sound different when spoken to the living proof of their failure. I listened without interrupting, then simply said, "I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to remind you who you were before greed made you smaller." Their eyes filled with tears, but I didn't look away. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not a gift for those who hurt us. It's a release we give ourselves, so their cruelty no longer lives rent-free inside our hearts. The authorities came soon after. Daniel Crawford's recordings and Miranda Torres's confessions did the rest. Justice was served, quietly, properly, without spectacle. Months later, I stood in court holding the child who had survived everyone's sins. His name, I told the judge, is Robert Sarah Hayes, for the man who taught me integrity and the girl who reminded me of its price. The judge smiled. "A new chapter, Mrs. Hayes." "Yes," I said, "one written in truth." Now, years later, my house feels alive again. Robert's laughter fills every corner. Jake still brings fish on Sundays. Mrs. Chen visits with tea and stories. We are not bound by blood, but by choice. And perhaps that is what family truly means. When I think back to that day on the yacht, I no longer see the betrayal. I see the beginning of clarity, courage, and peace. Because dignity, once reclaimed, doesn't shout. It simply stands tall and lets the world adjust to its silence. If this story has touched you, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Click like if you believe truth doesn't need to be loud to be powerful, and subscribe if you too believe that grace, even after betrayal, is the quietest form of victory. Because in the end, what saves us isn't wealth, revenge, or even justice. It's the courage to face cruelty without becoming it. And that, my friends, is how you rise, not above others, but above the worst version of yourself.